Hey everyone, this is Tara from Wild Bird Farm. I am in my garage, stalling on going outside. Well, it's 39 degrees, the wind is howling, and I need to do some quick work in the hoop houses today. I'm going to be direct sowing both seed that I've purchased and seed that I collected last season. So these are early annuals, hardy or cool flowers. So come with me and we'll head outside. I am hopeful that my microphone does a good job of picking up my voice and not all the noise of the wind. I apologize if this one is a little bit loud. I wasn't planning to do any direct sowing in this house because if you've been with me for a while, it is filled with things I planted mostly last fall. But I'm going to take you down in the foxglove row. I noticed several bupleurum that had self-sowed. I have no idea where they came from. Before we put this house up in the fall, this was grass. Now, when I made the beds in here, we didn't have the plastic on yet, so my best guess is late last summer or fall, the wind brought some seed down before we had it enclosed. And that's where the bupleurum seed came from. I'm not sure, but a few of the foxglove died off, and I love to interplant crops. So we're just going to try this year since there's already a couple growing. I'm going to sow some more bupleurum seed down there. 41 degrees in here. It looks like it got to a low of 18. That was probably last night, actually. So what you can see behind me right here, I have about a 20, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe a 15-foot row of foxglove. I brought in plugs late last summer, and these have been planted out here probably since early September. Now, as far as my bupleurum, I gathered seed last season. I actually don't think I have any that I purchased. We are just going with save seed this year for bupleurum. If I can find which bag it is. Let's see, not that one. There, this one. All right, I just put it in a mesh bag. You can see there's, I didn't sift it down to only seed. This I think actually helps me because if you grab a handful of it and maybe 2/3 of it is seed as you're sprinkling it, you don't get it quite so heavy. Just something that I don't take extra work to kind of filter out some of that dry matter. I'm going to take you off the tripod. Let's go look and see if we can hunt down the bupleurum that's self-sowed. Okay, the other reason why I think this might be an okay spot to do some interplanting is I have had a couple of the foxglove just sort of peter out on me throughout the winter here. Now I did come through maybe 2 weeks ago and sort of weed this, and this is when I noticed some of the bupleurum. You can see I didn't get all the weeds, but it's better than it was. Like this is a weed I missed, but looky here, self-sown bupleurum. 1, 2, 3, there's 4, 5, 6, kind of real close with the foxglove. That might be about it. Oh, there's another one there. But we do have some space, and you know, if it wants to grow on the edges, I think these two are going to be okay together. Now, I am not an expert on interplanting by any means, but when I've got extra space, I fill it up because I love a productive bed. There's another one right there. Must have blown in a branch or something. I can't believe how much is here. There's another really large one, and it's surprised me a little bit how big they are. And I maybe should have done a little bit of seed spreading earlier, and then I'd have a couple successions. But we're going to get to work here. I am just going to sprinkle it throughout this bed. And then I ended up planting my anemones here where we had a little break before the Sweet William. Sweet William is pretty densely packed in here, so I think I will just take my bupleurum down to here, and we're just going to sprinkle some seed and see what happens this year. This is just another example of why Mother Nature is so awesome, because I am willing to bet that if we had at least eight to 10 probably volunteer bupleurum seeds right down here on this side of the bed, I bet the Sweet William also saw some seeds blow in, but since it is so densely packed, I haven't seen any popping up in there. But those seeds found some room to grow here by the foxglove, and so they're living their best life. I just think nature that way is pretty darn cool. So I am just going to take a handful, and I would say there's a lot of seed in here, but there's also some dry chaff, and that's going to help me, I think, just spread it out. Now I'm going to try and focus a little bit more on the empty areas. We did have some warm weather this past week, and I watered this house about 5 days ago. You can tell by the walkways there's still quite a bit of moisture in here. It would be nice if our weather allows for me to get in here and just water this seed in a little bit. But I am not sure I'm going to get that done here in the next week or so. So the seed may sit until I get that done. Now, I don't want to use all my seed. I would like to do a second sowing here outdoors. I usually do my cool flower direct seeding. It's really a great idea if the specific plant will live through your winter season, to do it in the fall. And I did spread some seed of bupleurum in the fall, but then I also like to come through generally late February, early March, and put a little bit more seed out, just kind of an insurance policy that if the fall seed got washed away or eaten by birds or something, that there's some more that has a chance to grow. All right, I think we are going to call it here for the bupleurum. Now I have 5 or 6 different varieties that we're going to put in our old smaller hoop house. I don't have as much room in there, so they're going to kind of be small little patches, but I'm hoping that gives us some earlier season blooms. So let's head over there. I'm hoping that house isn't a lot louder. Okay, we'll give this a try in here. It is pretty loud. So just so you know, right behind me where you see the white frost cloth, that is where I'm trying to overwinter a couple eucalyptus. So that has just been covered like that since probably early December. Now, right below where the camera is sitting is my patch where I've traditionally grown Sweet William. So I do have some of those seeds. I'm going to sprinkle a few of those around. And then from about here down, we're going to do little plantings of the hardy annual seeds. Now I do kind of directly across from us have some tulips planted. And then the back far corner and then the back middle, I am saving for my stock that I'm starting to grow to have room for that. So I think today we'll mostly just be working with this stretch here to get a few of these seeds direct sown. I did grab a garden claw. I'm going to loosen up the soil a little bit. I watered in here as well. It seems drier though, so I am definitely going to have to get my hose out at the next nice day and really give this a nice watering. I think the soil is wet, but ideally I'd have it pretty saturated before I put the seeds down, but way too chilly out there to do that today. So we're going to get started. I did make tags, so I kind of remind myself what should be growing there. That way we can see how everything did. And I am going to get started just with the Sweet William right around where the camera is sitting. Okay, next up, I took my claw and kind of just loosened up the dirt. It is pretty moist, so that's a good thing. All right, I found my tags from last year, and both my nigella and my orlaya were right here after the Sweet William. So I have struggled in the past getting my nigella tall enough for wrap bouquets. I didn't notice last year in here it was a little bit taller than out in the field. So I did some research. I really wanted white, and I found that the bridal veil and the African bride tended to be a little bit taller than some of the blue varieties I've grown. So I picked up a packet of each, and so we're going to spread those here. And then I have saved the white finch orlaya seeds. These are a little pokey. I'm going to wish I had my gloves, but I'm not running back out to get them. These will need to be covered with soil. So I'll do a little bit of scraping the soil and then moving it back. The nigella really doesn't need that. This self-sows for me really well. I know I'll have some patches outside of nigella. I'm just trying to get a little bit taller stems. So that's mostly why we're trying it in here. And I did notice I had some nigella last year kind of mixed in with a campanula, and so it kind of had to do a little bit of fighting to get space and to get light, and I wonder if that also helped getting the stems a little bit longer. So I'm gonna try a little bit and interplant both of these and just see what we come up with this year. All right, I went through and doing the orlaya first, I kind of tried to pull the soil back, and in doing so, I actually found a couple of orlaya seeds. So that's kind of exciting. I'm hoping to have a good crop in here for absolutely free since it's saved seed. I'm going to try this one-handed. Get my tag out of the way. But I'm just going to sprinkle it lightly, and then I'm going to pull the soil back over. I'm not going to freak out too much if everything isn't covered though, because when I come through and water it, that's going to kind of help settle the seed down. And obviously when nature drops the seeds, some of them are going to be sitting on top of the soil. I think one more handful will do it here. I really used a lot of orlaya. I was kind of surprised how much. Now, when I planted a second sowing outside later in the spring, it never got tall enough really for me to use. But this early orlaya in here, I used a ton in my early bouquets. Added, of course, that little pop of white. If you watched my recent video, I talked all about how I love having a little white in bouquets. If you haven't watched that, I'll put a link down there. But the orlaya, and I'm hoping this white nigella really fill that gap for me in the spring when I have a lot of perennials that seem to be spike flowers, maybe in the purple blue vein. It's really nice to have some white filler. So I'm pretty hopeful that that will do the trick here. Now I'm going to move down to this section here for my nigella, and I'm also going to sprinkle some where we just put the orlaya, hoping to get longer stems. And then I'll link these tags. They're nice because they're a little longer and my dogs can't pull them out of the ground as well. I haven't had them for a lot of seasons though, to see how sturdy they'll be throughout the seasons. All right, and then we'll finish talking about these before I get you back on the tripod here. I have two kinds of cress, Persian and penny cress. And then I have saponaria, which I've never grown, so this will be a first. And then I have two types of larkspur that I'll show you. So the balance of these is going to run here once I get that soil kind of cleaned off and worked up. I'm going to say this mostly for my benefit. If I can tell the difference between these two white nigella and I want to look back on which was which later, I'm going to put the African bride on the far left and then the bridal veil on the right, and then where I sprinkle it with the orlaya is just going to be a mix. I have read an easy way, if you don't have a lot of the really small seeds, is to mix this with a little cup of sand. That way when you're spreading it out, it's easier to get it well spread out rather than just dumping them all in one spot. I think that's a great idea. Okay, I'm gonna put these in my bag and then we will start. Oh, I think I got a little bit of something jammed in my finger there. All right, we will clean off that next bit of space and get the rest direct sowed. The other thing I love so much about direct sowing, I feel like I've said this 8 times. Another thing I love about direct sowing is it's quick. So even if it's nasty outside, like today, even if it was cold but it wasn't windy, I could easily bundle up and head out for 10 or 15 minutes and get all of this direct sowed. All right, let's go. Okay, I had come through and cleaned this bed, so it was relatively easy. There was just some dried matter that I just took my little rake and just kind of raked it all clear. Now, it doesn't look very wide on this video, but I would say this is at least 3 feet wide, so that's a good amount of space. So in this first chunk, I would say it's about 3 by 4 feet probably. We're gonna put the 2 types of larkspur that I have. One is French alouette, I'll put that on the left, and Singing the Blues on the right. I got these 2 varieties from Renee's garden. I have had larkspur out in my perennial and reseeder rows for a couple of years now. I have yet to get tall, beautiful stems to harvest. They're relatively short. I don't know if they've reseeded themselves too thick, so they're not getting tall enough, or I wonder if it's our temperatures here. It gets hot so quickly that when they want to be blooming, they just don't have optimal temperatures. I've noticed some people in the Northwest have beautiful, huge, like 4 or 5 feet tall. Mine are like maybe 18 inches. So I've never tried them in the tunnel. So this is kind of a trial year to see how these do. I also will have some outside. Actually, there's a lot in here, so I might save some of these. And that would be kind of a good comparison if I plant some of these same exact seeds outside to see how they do, if they do get taller here in the tunnel. Now I am going to try and make some short rows here, just be a little bit easier for weeding, but we'll see how I do. I haven't ordered too much from Renee's garden, but there is a lot of seeds in here. I'm really happy with that. So we'll definitely plan to do a comparison here. So I did about 3 rows, be able to do about 3 rows of each kind here. And I'm just sprinkling them. A general rule is, depending on the size of your seed, is how far down they need to go. Larkspur is one that reseeds really well here. So I know that if I just give it some good contact with moist soil, I don't necessarily need to bury it. All right, I did use all of the Singing the Blues. There wasn't quite as many in there, but we will save some of the other. All right, next up, saponaria. Now this variety I got from Johnny's. It's called Pink Beauty. I have never grown this before. It's supposed to get to 24 to 34 inches high. This is a cool season annual. So it says it performs best in areas with cool summers. You want to sow every 2 to 3 weeks for a continuous bloom. Blooms July to August. So this isn't going to bloom quite as early as I thought it would. But the days to harvest is only 55 to 65. So we'll have to see. I would assume I'm going to get this earlier than July, but we will see. I'm definitely, since this is my first year, I'll definitely be planting some of this outdoors as well. These are good size seeds. It does say that direct sowing is recommended for saponaria. Otherwise, with it being my first year, I might start some in a plug tray, but since it prefers that, we're going the easy route this summer. So we're gonna sow this pretty heavily here in this, oh, it's about 3 by 3 foot patch. Now, since I am seeding pretty heavily, I may need to come back through and thin a little bit, just depending per variety of flower, what the seed pack says, as far as if you really need to thin them to like 1 inch or something, 1 to 2 inches between the plants. So we'll kind of go by the guidance on the seed packet for that. And since I haven't grown this before and I don't know how easily it germinates, I'm going pretty heavy on sowing, so this might be one that I'd need to thin. Let's see what it says here. Sow seeds every 2 inches, 1/4 inch deep. Thin to 2 to 9 inches apart. So this probably likely will be one I'll need to come through and thin a little bit. Since it did say this one wanted to be covered, I'm just going to real lightly kind of rake some of the soil around. See if I can kind of get that seed covered. Again, when I come in to water this, that's really going to do more for getting the seed at the right depth. Okay, next up and last is our 2 kinds of cress. With the penny cress, I kind of have a hodgepodge. I bought some seeds off of another farmer, so I have a few of those left, and then I collected some. So we're probably going to use most of these and just spread them out pretty heavily down here. Now, some of the cresses are definitely considered a weed, and around here I've noticed some of the penny cress in particular growing up like behind our shed where I did not plant it. So it definitely can be a problem, especially if you have limited space. You might want to be careful. My thought is if I'm sowing it here, I'm going to harvest every single stem, even if I don't use it. That way it's not going to seed and not spreading everywhere. The other train of thought is if I'm going to use it in a bouquet, I must like it pretty well. So if it does pop up in some places I wasn't expecting, I'm not going to be too mad about it. All right, the final thing is our Persian cress, and I got this from Johnny's. This is an old seed packet, but I've got enough to put in here, so we're just gonna do some quick direct sowing. Similar with the saponaria, I don't think it really needs to be covered, but I'm just going to go through real lightly. And that is all there is to it. Direct sowing really couldn't be simpler, and with the cost of seeds pretty minimal, and if you save some of your own, the cost is virtually free. I encourage you to try some direct sowing of those plants that love it in your garden. One trick, now on Johnny's seeds, they say which way the seed prefers to be sown, whether transplanted or direct sowed. Many of the different seed packs will say that as well. But lots of our hardy annuals, especially those that can overwinter, that are zone hardy to your zone, they are just fine being direct seeded in the fall, in late winter, or even in an early spring. So let me know in the comments below what you're planning to direct sow this season.